Uhuru, brothers and sisters. This is Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the Uhuru movement. It's an organization that was created a long time ago, more than 50 years ago, for the purpose of winning the freedom of our people. And so today, what we want to talk about is this Juneteenth issue and the way it is being characterized and mischaracterized. And the question is whether or not freedom has really come. Did Juneteenth really represent freedom? And whether or not the U.S. federal government is in a position or should be in a position to confer freedom on African people. So that's what we want to talk about. And the fact of the matter is that the United States government attempted to prevent this commentary with two state pre-dawn raids that attacked the offices of the African People's Socialist Party that I lead, along with the homes of me and others, two of whom are facing 15-year prison sentences for speaking, for doing what the Juneteenth celebration has conferred upon us by the federal government suggests that we have a right to do. And so it is because I'm attacking this hullabaloo surrounding the establishment of Juneteenth as a federal holiday that I am being attacked, not specifically and just because of this, but because I'm attacking this is because it's another example, another attempt by the United States government to absolve itself of the crimes that it has committed and continues to commit against our people up to this day. The fact is, on July 2nd, 2 days before the celebration of the July 4th hysteria that's characterized as Independence Day by this government, on July 2nd, 2022, someone using a military-grade flamethrower burned a red, black, and green flag, a 15 by 25-foot red, black, and green flag, hanging on a 50-foot flagpole at the Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. Uhuru means freedom. The Uhuru House in St. Petersburg, Florida. And that happened something like 27 days before the federal government would attack that same building using battering rams, using grenades, they call them flashbang grenades, using drones, guns, and what have you, very violent attack that on the same day they used against my home in St. Louis and offices of our party and our movement and homes of people associated with us, a part of our movement on July 29th. So this is something that happened. And today we are supposed to be celebrating Juneteenth. We are the federal holiday. So they burned a red, black, and green flag on July 2nd, 2022. And then now they've conferred upon us a red, white, and blue flag that is coincidentally the same color of the flag of the United States government that's responsible for our enslavement and our imprisonment. They officially confer a red, white, and blue flag they call the Juneteenth flag that supposedly represents freedom for our people. And in fact, I've heard it referred to as the second independence by people who support and who are part of this government. So we make these criticisms, and I've made these criticisms because we cannot allow, it's my responsibility to challenge any notion that's forwarded by the government, forwarded by supporters of the government, forwarded by minions of the oppression of African people. We can't allow these to go unchecked. And where we know that right now there are thousands, perhaps millions of African people who are celebrating today. And of course, as we know, the Juneteenth celebration was not something that was created by the federal government. The fact is that Juneteenth is something that African people began to celebrate in 1865 when this guy, a general from the United States government, came into Galveston, Texas, and say, "Hey, You're supposed to be free now. And in Galveston, after suffering this long time oppression as a people, people began to celebrate there. And this is what we characterize as Juneteenth. White folks didn't do this. African people did this to celebrate in Galveston, Texas, that we were supposed to be free. We're still not free in Texas. Obviously, we're not. Just saw just a few weeks ago, an African in Galveston, in Texas, was not Galveston, but in Texas, was just sentenced to 70 years in prison for spitting on a white cop. So that certainly doesn't sound like freedom in Texas to me or any place else. But it's this celebration that began there by Africans who had come out from under formal official slavery, that we had a celebration that the boss, the guy with the gun, was not able to stand on top of us, oppressing us, and partially because you had the federal government had come in there, General Granger, I think his name was, to bring the message that we were supposed to be free. And so we make the criticism that that didn't bring freedom, that we still are not free, that you can't say that we are free if the government is going to be attacking my home on July 2022 with armored vehicles, with battering rams, with flashbang grenades, knocking down doors, knocking down every door in some of the offices that we have in St. Petersburg and Florida and St. Louis, Missouri. That's not freedom. So we're making these criticisms. We have made these criticisms. And the reason that the government attacked us on July 29th, the reason that they knocked our doors down and threatened me, my life, and the life of my wife, and the life of my comrades on that day, is because the United States cannot tolerate these criticisms, especially because if we are not free, then it means that African people should still be struggling to get freedom. If we are free, if we have been given a red, white, and blue flag, just like the white man has a red, white, and blue flag, then what's the basis of our struggling? But we keep making these criticisms because we say we are not free. And in fact, what we have said, and because we have initiated so-called Juneteenth programs in the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru movement, with the slogan that not yet Uhuru, not yet Uhuru, we are not yet free. And so when we make these criticisms, then the United States government, to cover this, to make it impossible. So you can't criticize the United States government for the continued enslavement of African people, because it mobilizes African people to keep fighting, to keep trying to fight for your freedom. And also it's a criticism of what the nature of this system is altogether. How in the hell can there be this freedom that you're talking about, Juneteenth, that we are supposed to be celebrating? And so they say that to liquidate these criticisms, to make it impossible for us to criticize, and to do so without trying to pretend that they're not attacking us at cost of exercising what they say is our right for free speech. They say, we're not attacking you because of free speech. We're not attacking Black people because they have the audacity to criticize the United States government. They claim that Black people, when we criticize the United States government, not criticizing on our own, that we don't have the smarts on our own, that we don't understand that we've been oppressed all this time, that the murder of Black people is something that doesn't have to be discussed, because when you discuss it, then you are agent. You're working as an agent. You're working as an agent for a foreign power that's trying to undermine the United States government. You're sowing discord in the United States in the employ of a foreign government. So these criticisms, which whenever allowed, they are allowed, it destroys the myth of the United States as this shining city on the hill that selfishly spreads freedom and democracy to the peoples of the globe, and our emancipation as Black people being a clear example of what a wonderful place this is. But the fact is that the freedom that we have allegedly attained clearly does not include freedom of speech as guaranteed by their constitution, not today, any more than it allowed free speech of 14-year-old Emmett Till, who was brutally lynched, murdered in 1955 for the bogus charge of whistling at a white woman. I mean, that's a hell of a thing. They want to kill. They talk about free speech. They still haven't rectified that. And so then the white woman who was a part of this frame up, this bogus claim, who was someone who was an accomplice in the murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till in 1955, died, even though no charges were ever made against her. And the white men who they charged with it belatedly was someone who never served a day in jail, a day in prison, and in fact, who were found not guilty in a court. What kind of freedom is that? And then made money selling the story about that. Who is free? The ones who lynched the boy, the ones who participated in that, the ones who make money telling the story about that, or the black people with whom Emmett Till was associated, including me, including you, brothers and sisters. So this free speech and the right to criticize the United States government, free speech that includes what I am to say about the slimy American con game that provides a federal holiday to celebrate our continuing enslavement by another name, is something that I'm facing prison for exercising. How dare you do this? How dare you act like you're supposed to be free? You're a pretty uppity guy. And so the fact is that we're not free. There is not yet Uhuru. And we can't fight for freedom if we accept the lie inherent in this so-called gift of freedom being so generously bestowed upon us by the United States government that continues to imprison us for seeking it, that continues to slander us for seeking it, that continues to go so far as to say that black people don't have enough sense to know that we are oppressed and I'm fighting for freedom. Therefore, a foreign government or Russians or somebody has to say this. And to the point that we accept this definition of freedom that they impose on us. Juneteenth, they give us a holiday and a red, white, and blue flag, to the point that we accept their definition of our freedom. Garbage. And so there's not yet Uhuru. So Juneteenth was an African celebration that originated in Galveston, Texas, following the end of the Civil War, that was fought between contending groups of white settlers, was fought around the economic direction that this country on the land that was brutally wrenched from the original custodians of the land, who are currently called Indians, and what direction that this country, this economy was going to go by these white settlers in the North and in the South were fighting around this question on stolen land from the indigenous population. These are settlers. And then land that was developed, an economy that was developed by African people who are enslaved and brought here at gunpoint. We have to get the narrative right. Because if you don't get the narrative right, they continue to say things like America is a country of immigrants. And the indigenous people are not immigrants. This is their land that was stolen from them. They suffer from a form of settler colonialism. African people are not immigrants. We came here at gunpoint, as captives. And this narrative that they create about a nation of immigrants is to disguise the fact that there's a settler colony here. There's that African people suffer domestic colonialism, and you cannot confer freedom on a colonized people with a red, white, and blue flag, and you taking a holiday that African people had invented for ourselves in Galveston, Texas, and now you talking about how it represents Americans' gift to us as freedom. No, it doesn't work that way. So we say that as quiet as it's kept, the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed by Lincoln and that has subsequently been described as something to free colonially enslaved Africans, did no such thing. The Emancipation Proclamation was not for us. And the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863. It was a war tactic. It was a strategy of the war because the United States, because the Northerners, bourgeoisie, the northern colonizers, the northern capitalists, or who were engaged in a form of capital-intensive capitalism, these folk initiated or participated in this war, and they were now trying to break the back of these folk who were in the South, who had this labor economy based on the stolen labor of African people, intensive slave labor. And so this Emancipation Proclamation, 1863, it only freed Africans in theory in parts of the United States where Lincoln, the great emancipator, and the Union government had no power. It did not extend to the United States. Even the phony Emancipation Proclamation did not extend to the entire United States, just to those territories in what they call the United States, where the Union had no power, where Lincoln had no power. And so this was done to threaten and demoralize the Southern colonizers and to encourage uprisings by Africans held in colonial bondage that would function as a military force behind enemy lines. And we were already fighting. As you know, we've been fighting forever. Even before they even thought about an Emancipation Proclamation, you had Nat Turner, who was saying strike at night and spare no one. You had Denmark Vesey, you had Gabriel Prosser, you had Harriet Tubman, you had Black people who were fighting for our freedom. That's where our freedom was centered in, not some Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln. And the thing is that Lincoln tried to give some agency to these Africans who were already fighting for our freedom by saying that in 1863, every place where an African is located, where I have no power, y'all free. That was it. Check it out. And so it was something to initiate another a front of war behind enemy lines, in this instance of those in the South. It was in 1865, with the defeat of the South, that the Union government, with the defeat of the South in 1865, the Union government had the power to, quote unquote, emancipate the enslaved Africans. And in that year, shortly after the conquest of power, this is interesting, shortly after the conquest of power, the United States amended the Constitution. This is now, the Union is in control. It has the power. It had, when it had no power, it said African people were free in the places where it had no power. Now that it has the power, it says that now it passes in December. In January 1st, African people are supposed to be free. In December of 1865, and then it puts forth the 13th Amendment. And the 13th Amendment is something that says that neither servitude, involuntary servitude, nor enslavement all of that is prohibited. Involuntary servitude, enslavement is prohibited, except as punishment for a crime. And then that was the 13th Amendment, that they said, okay, the Union now has power. The Union now has the capacity, where it didn't have it in 1863 when it said that we were free in the places where there was no power. Now with the conquest of power, it says that that nobody can be a slave unless they're a prisoner, unless they have been convicted of a crime. And then what happened? So you see the emergence of these black codes throughout the South and what have you, because this was a loophole. Let's say that you can still keep African people enslaved, and it did. In fact, African people rebuilt the South. So they had these black codes that created new types of offenses. I see that I'm reading from someone who is Andrea Armstrong, who's a law professor at Loyola University in New Orleans, who writes, first, the 13th Amendment text allows for involuntary servitude where convicted of a crime. And then at the same time, black codes in the South created new types of offenses, especially attitudinal offenses, not showing proper respect, those types of things. So this is what we see. So they said slavery can only be there at the time when someone goes to prison, is charged and goes to prison, And then what they do is create crimes that will determine that black people are going to be in prison, even based on your attitudes and things like that. Don't show proper respect to white people, etc. So, but the fact is, we don't even have to go so far back in history to see the fraudulent nature of freedom as defined by our colonizers within current U.S. borders. We have only to look at the reality of our situation today, the one that the U.S. government imprisons us for talking about, with claims that to do so makes us agents of foreign powers attempting to sow discord within the United States. We don't sow discord. We expose discord by simply telling the truth. It is the truth that the United States government cannot tolerate and makes it necessary to falsify history, to make the myth of our struggle being over. They create the myth of the struggle being over with a new federal holiday of Juneteenth, which is characterized as the second Independence Day. And I look at this and I think of what they did. They murder Martin Luther King and give you a holiday. So they killed King. They tortured him. They had FBI chasing him everywhere, framing him up, tried to make him commit suicide. And King was somebody who was struggling for the freedom of our people, who talked about a poor people's campaign and things like that. Then they killed King. And then they give you something to celebrate. Now you can celebrate the fact that they killed King because they give you the day off. You can get a long holiday. You can have barbecues and get drunk and what have you, but you don't have King. And you don't have the movement that King created. You don't have a freedom struggle. And they would now celebrate Martin Luther King's murder or his birth as one of the things that shows that we are free. Now we are free. There's a Martin Luther King Boulevard Street in almost every city in this country where black people exist. What more do you want? And this is the kind of sleight of hand that the government uses against us. And this is the thing that they do to destroy, slander, attack, imprison anybody who exposes this scam and say we are a long way from being freedom. Well, maybe not a long way, but what they are offering up as freedom has nothing to do with our freedom. So we're not the ones that are sowing discord, just telling the truth. How is that sowing discord unless there's something about the nature of the system that the truth brings disharmony? And that's, I think, what we're looking at. But look at what we're talking about in this era that they characterize some as the second Independence Day. And they have to have a second Independence Day because Frederick Douglass did a remarkable job in exposing the Independence Day that they talk about. And they exposed the Independence Day when they attacked the red, black, and green on July 2nd, 2 days before the celebration of Independence Day in 2022, with burning the flag at the Uhuru House. They burned the red, black, and green and then give us the red, white, and blue. So look at the fact is that despite the uprisings following the police murder of George Floyd, were we free then? The murder of George Floyd, were we free when that white man in a police uniform sat there with his knee on George Floyd's neck, looking into a camera, smirking? Were we free then? So despite the uprisings following the police murder of George Floyd, and there were uprisings all over the United States, people rose up, burned down police stations and things like that. Were we free then? Are we free now because the United States confers upon us this concept of Juneteenth being a federal holiday? Now you can have a barbecue to celebrate a lie. And so, but despite that, the number of African people murdered by the police has actually increased. It's escalated since that. Goes on every day. That's freedom. And African women in the United States are 3 times more likely to die during or after pregnancy than white women. That's the freedom. This is the material reality that we are talking about. 1 out of every 8 human beings in prison on the planet Earth is an African man in the United States. Is that freedom? And African babies are twice as likely as white babies to die during or after birth. And the gap is getting greater. Is that freedom? African people in the United States are nearly 6 times more likely to be put in prison than white people. African people are 40% of the entire prison population in the United States, while being 13% of the United States population. 1 in 5 Black men in prison is serving a life sentence. The largest gap between white and African people is the wealth gap is getting even larger. The median wealth of a white family increased by 8.1% between 2017 and 2019, while the median wealth of a Black family decreased by 4.2%. America, only place in the largest population of children, largest child prison population on earth. In this country, Black people, Black children. The only country where a child can get life imprisonment is America. Black children. So this is what we are talking about, unemployment. And so this federal Juneteenth even provides, as I said, a red, white, and blue flag. Clearly, this is simply another means of camouflaging an attack on our continuing struggle for real freedom. The freedom that is to be found in the red, black, and green flag that we Africans, some 50,000 strong, adopted ourselves voluntarily. White man didn't give us this flag. The government didn't come together and say, let's create a red, black, and green flag for Black people and pretend they're free. As a part of the struggle to be free, as a part of the criticism against our condition in this country. African people, before social media, before internet, even when it was difficult to travel anywhere for fear of being lynched, came together in Madison Square Garden in New York in 1920 under the leadership of Marcus Garvey and created the red, black, and green flag. This is the flag that we created. This was the thing, and it was a flag that said that, as Marcus Garvey said, that we have to be free as a people, one Africa, one nation, Africa for Africans at home and abroad, not a plantation. And this has been one of the great contests that's existed in this country. The oppressor oppresses us, kills us, takes away our freedom, take away our land, take away our names, take everything they've got, everything we've got. They try to steal it from us. But they haven't stolen the will to fight, the will to struggle. So what they would do is camouflage it so that you don't even know what you're fighting for. That's their intent. But I know, African People's Socialist Party knows, the Uhuru movement knows, and there are people, African people, who are determined to be free. And so to keep this discussion from happening, they will bomb my house. They told us that Black people got the right to vote. If you want to get something, don't pick up a gun. Don't do anything like that. Malcolm X said the ballot or the bullet. And then they said, well, you don't have to use the bullet. They said you can have the ballot. I participated in the struggle throughout the South to register Black people to vote at risk of life. And then they passed a Voting Rights Act in 1965. A Voting Rights Act said that we have the right to vote. Same year they killed Malcolm X. They killed Malcolm X in 1965. He said the ballot or the bullet. So I worked, and many people, Africans throughout this country, worked to get the right to the ballot. And yet they will attack me and then put me in prison. I'm facing a 15-year-old prison sentence because I organized Black people to participate in the electoral process, but not on their terms. We say, we're going to participate in the electoral process, but we are not doing it the way these Uncle Tom minions that you put there, that you put in charge of us. We say, on the ballot, we're going to put reparations. On the ballot, we're going to put Black community control of the police. On the ballot, we're going to be against genocide against Black people. On the ballot, we're going to put that. And we're going to give everybody an opportunity to vote on that. You didn't give us a vote on that red, white, and blue flag that you just created and called ours. And so they don't want us to vote. They didn't want us to vote. That's why they were lynching Black people. That's why they were using bombs and brutality against African people when we were trying to vote before. That's why they killed 3 Black babies. They killed those Black babies in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, bombed them for trying to vote. And that's why they bombed my house in 2022 for participating in an election. We've organized African people to participate in elections. But not on their terms. They say, okay, you can vote, but just vote like we want you to vote. That's what they mean, which is no freedom. Not yet Uhuru. Not yet Uhuru. So we say that again, after the war came to a close, the Civil War, in 1865, General Granger arrived in Galveston and that June and signaled freedom for Texas, for the 250,000 Africans who were held in colonial slavery in Texas. And what we see, of course, is that struggles have occurred since that time. And they lied to us. They take everything. Because the fact is that our objective cannot be, and this is something we're talking about, there's been this contentions, this contending ideas, even within those of us who are enslaved about what freedom means. And some of us cannot see freedom off the plantation. And so we work to make the plantation more comfortable. Some of us can't do like Nat Turner and fight to end slavery, or Gabriel Prosser, or Denmark Vesey to end slavery, or Toussaint Louverture, or others to end slavery. What we do is try to find a better place in slavery, to make slavery more comfortable. But at the moment, we understand that we are colonized as a people. And colonialism is foreign and alien domination of a people for political oppression and economic exploitation. That's what colonialism is all over the world. And colonialism can't be cured by finding a better colonizer or a more comfortable colonialism. You've heard people make statements like this was a good slave master versus a bad slave master. That's ridiculous. Slavery is an offense against humanity, and African people are central to humanity. So the thing is that our struggle is against colonialism, and it has always been against colonialism. And there cannot be comfort, there cannot be security under foreign and alien domination. The only way that we can have Uhuru is that we become a self-determining, self-governing people. The only way we can have Uhuru is for African people who suffer globally. We suffer in Africa, in part because of the war continues in Africa, subsequent even to the theft of Black people. It's the most precious resource of Africa. Now finding ourselves in Galveston, Texas, waiting for a man named Granger to come through and say we are free. So we suffer on the continent of Africa because Africans are producing wealth and value for Europeans on stolen land of the indigenous people for these settlers. We suffer in the United States and various other places because the attack on Africa, the misery that's imposed on Africa, the colonialism that was imposed on Africa has been exported from Africa by our colonizers, where we've been dispersed all around the world. Everywhere you look in the world, you see us facing the same conditions. Not yet Uhuru. And characterizing a red, white, and blue flag as our flag and saying that Juneteenth brought us freedom is ridiculous. What we have to say is that we have to take our freedom. And you can't be a dignified people. You can have no dignity as a people as long as you do not have the ability to feed, clothe, and house yourselves. As long as somebody else dictates what you can listen to, what you can say and what you can't say. As long as the foreign government that put you in chains, put you in shackles, say that we'll put shackles back on you if you say anything about what it is that we do to you or what we have done to you. A white man named George Orwell once said that who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. And those who empower the colonizer, in a very shaky way, they've been able to control the past, define what the past is. That's why they talk about Juneteenth. That's why they tell these lies about emancipation and all these other things. Those who control that past, as long as they can define for us, they are able to control the future. They say, who controls the past controls the future. That's why they need a Juneteenth. That's a part of the process of controlling the past. And who controls the present controls the past. And we're living at a time where the colonizer is standing on very shaky ground and is experiencing loss of control of the present. And this loss of control of the present is something that is coming about as a consequence of peoples around the world, and especially of African people throughout the world, and especially African people in the United States at the heart of the hegemon, the big boss, the one that controls the entire world. We are engaged in struggle that makes uncertain the ability to control this present, which means it's increasingly difficult to control the past, which means it's necessary to do bombs and things like that against my home so I cannot expose what it is that you have done, what it is that you do. We say that we have not yet achieved Uhuru. That is what we are fighting for. We say also that we have to push back. We recognize that these assaults on our people, and you must be clear about this. This attack on July 29th on the African People's Socialist Party, Uhuru movement, our whole movement is not something that's personal. It's not directing at me as Omali Yeshitela, as the chairman of the African People's. It's an assault on our people. And they have to come to me. And I'm proud that they have to come through me. They have to come through our party. They have to come through the Uhuru movement to get to the rest of you. That's why we're under assault. It's an attack on Black people. And so we're up front. And that's why we catch the brunt of it and we say, hell no. We say also, hands off Uhuru, hands off Africa, drop the charges now. Not yet Uhuru. Uhuru, brothers and sisters.